Yo, what's going on, guys? My name is Xfixiate, aka Axie, and today I want to give you some tips on how to maximize your success rate in Mythic Plus push weeks. The first thing I want to have a look at is routes. So if you've got a push group, it's super important to have your routes pre-planned. If you pre-plan a route, everyone knows exactly what groups you're going to be pulling and what order you're doing your trash in and stuff like that, so they can make sure they've got CDs up for the big pulls and the whole run just flows a bit better. You're not constantly waiting on the tank to take the lead and follow them around. All your DPS and healers can just start preemptively moving towards the next trash pack. It also means that when your group does the dungeon again, you already know the run that you're going to do. You might make a few small changes here and there, but all in all, it's going to be very similar. So they've got that practice, they've got that familiarity with the strategies you're using, who's CCing what mobs, who's getting what kicks and stuff like that, and the whole thing just flows a lot faster, a lot smoother, and you actually save a lot of time doing this. Even if you don't have a full push group, it's still super important that you know what routes you're doing. Quite often, it's the tank's job to have the route and know what trash percent they're going to pull. But even then, like if you're pugging, I know I've been in so many groups where you get to the dungeon and you're like, "Oh, tank, can you link your MDT route?" And he's like, "I don't have a route. I'm just gonna wing it or whatever." And you're just like, "Okay, I don't know about that one." Like in those situations, if you've got a route pre-planned in MDT, you can just share it with the group. Everyone knows what trash you're gonna pull, what order you're doing it in, and everyone's just got like at least a basic understanding of the run and what it's gonna look like. Even if you don't want to like go through and make your own routes or whatever, like that is a lot of effort. There's some really easy resources you can use to make sure you've got at least like a basic route that you can use in the worst case scenario. So like one of the best sources is literally like you go to Raider.io and then you just go under news and then there's literally the weekly route. So each week Dratnos just he puts together routes for every dungeon. He takes into consideration the weekly affixes and any changes you have to make around that. And then he literally just uploads it all to Raider.io, and if this website, oh, here we go. Um, yeah, so you can choose what week you're on. We'll choose this week's, and then literally, it's just like every single dungeon here. It's got when it loads, it's got some notes about each dungeon. It's got like a link to the route on Wago, so you can literally just copy the MDT import string, and then go into your in-game. So if we copy that, you go in-game, you hit MDT, and you literally just go import, okay, and import. And then bam, you've literally got the route that he's linked here. And it's also like really good. It's got some notes and stuff in here so that if there's anything important, you can just like read over that and it just gives you all the information you need. So having that as a bare minimum is like a great way to start your week. The next thing I want to talk about is your UI. Having a UI that works for you is insanely important. If you're in the middle of an AoE pack and you're trying to maximize your DPS, so you look at on the DPS meters, you're trying to make sure you're not standing in unnecessary damage or avoiding getting one shot by a mechanic, and then all of a sudden there's a cast that's going off, and you're asking yourself, "Oh, do I have an interrupt for that? Is my interrupt off cooldown? Can I stun it? Like, can I stop it in any way?" And you're just looking around for that information at your bars or something, and you're not paying attention to your feet, and then all of a sudden you're getting one shot by a mechanic. Like in those situations, it can be quite chaotic, especially if you don't know where to look for the information that you need at the time. That's why I think it's really important to make sure your interface like tracks all the cooldowns that you need, and you're not going to be looking too far away from your character to find that information. It's super easy these days to import a UI that's already like pre-made and you've got the fundamentals there. But even if you do that, I'd make sure you at least play with it so you know where to find the information that you need, or even just like customize it and make sure that you move stuff around so it works for you. And you import any extra like weak cores or anything like that you need, especially stuff like an interrupt tracker. The reason an interrupt tracker is so important is as you start doing higher keys, it's more and more important that you make sure you kick as many interruptible casts as you can. That way you're minimizing the amount of damage that's going out to your group, your healer can do more DPS, and you're just avoiding unnecessary damage. Another good thing to track is the cooldown of your group's utility abilities. The reason this is important is you might be in the middle of a pull, you're trying to kite away as a tank or something, and you're calling for an Ursols, but the Ursols is on cooldown, and your healer doesn't queue up his mic quick enough to let you know, and you're just waiting for it, relying on it, and it's just not coming. If you're tracking their cooldowns, you can easily check whether it's up before you start calling for it, and if you see that it's not up, you can start making a plan B. This can avoid massive wipes, and the wipe might end up leading to a deplete. So avoiding that initial mistake just saves you so much time and effort. The next thing I want to talk about is networking. Not everyone has a steady push group, and that's fine. You can still gain IO on push weeks by pugging. That being said, networking is so important for that. If you do pug a key and you play with a tank who seems to know the route well, or is using his utility or communicating with the healer about defensive cooldowns and what they're going to use next, then add him to your friends list. If you're playing with a DPS who's pumping some big damn, using his stuns and interrupts well, add him to your friends list. If you play with a healer who's keeping everyone alive, using their utility, using their external cooldowns, while also doing some DPS, add them to your friends list. You don't have to have a full 5-man push group, but having people who are tried and tested on your friends list is definitely going to save you a lot of time and effort. If you're doing a key and you're trying to find a DPS or a tank, whatever, you can quickly scroll through your friends list, be like, oh, I remember doing this key with them, and just like send them a message and invite them. And that way you know that they're going to be decent, and it's just one less variable in the equation when you're plugging a key. Adding people to your friends list and doing keys with them also gets you invited to more keys. You might be sitting in Zoltazar or Borealis, chain queuing for Mythic Plus groups. No one's inviting you because they say they want like 5k IO for a plus 15, and then all of a sudden the tank you ran with last week hits you up for a key. Jackpot! These groups are generally more likely to do multiple keys rather than just a one and done as well, so you're more likely to get success and get some IO out of those groups. The next one might sound super obvious, but always try your best. It's super important to always play to the best of your ability. I'm talking about making sure you're doing good DPS, looking for every opportunity to use your stuns, interrupts, and CCs, communicating with your group, and so on. The reason this is important is because you never know who's in your group. Your healer could be impressed with your performance and they've got a push group that needs an extra DPS, or you might just get a couple friend requests out of it, and then all of a sudden you've just unlocked even more opportunity to gain IO and more keys that you can get invited to. And also, when I say play to the best of your ability, I'm also talking about your attitude. We've all been in a pug where one person has been doing shit DPS or failing mechanics or just literally has no fucking clue what's going on. But being toxic or rude towards them is never going to help the situation. You can try to help them by explaining a mechanic like, hey, be careful not to stand in front of this mob, he does a frontal, or something like that, but just be careful to do it in a constructive way, because flaming them usually just leads to them dropping group. Also, treat every key like it's timeable until it isn't. What I mean by this is don't just randomly leave the group after one death or one wipe. With the corruption and DPS we have at the moment, it's still totally realistic to time a key even with multiple deaths or even a full wipe. If you can get back quickly and recover, then more often than not you'll find yourself making up for lost time just by playing clean and pumping some big damn. My next tip is plan your corruption. Corruption is such a huge part of the game in 8.3, it gives you insane survivability, some massive damage, and really good utility. You always want to know how much corruption you're going to run and what you can fit into your corruption budget to get the most out of it. With my group, we always know what weeks we're pushing on in advance, so what we do is we figure out the corruption resistance for that week, and then figure out what we can wear afterwards. For example, week 6 is one of the best push weeks for high keys. Bursting, Volcanic, and Fortified are just really good affixes for high keys. I've worked out that the corruption resistance is 179 on that week, so I can wear that much without going over 59 corruption equipped. As a demon hunter, I'm always going to want to have 2 void lashes for 50 corruption, and then because I'm running quite high keys, I want versatile corruptions for the survivability. So I'm running 4 rank 3s for 80 corruption, filling it out with a rank 1 verse for 10 corruption, and then a rank 3 expedient and a rank 2 expedient to meter haste breakpoint. So I've put over here that it's 175 corruption total, and then I've got 4 spare. The only reason I track the spare is so that next week when we get an extra 3, that's 7, I now know that I can put an extra rank of stats in there somewhere. The reason this is so important is that if you don't pre-plan and you get to a week that you want to push in, and then all of a sudden you've realized that you've got enough budget for an extra rank 1 stats or something like that, and you can't buy it or you don't have it pre-purchased, then all of a sudden you're stuck running 49 corruption and you're just missing out on free damage. The next thing I want to talk about is the fact that not every key is an upgrade, and not every key is timed. Once you start timing keys at your goal level, there will come a time where you can't find a group that's a direct IO upgrade. Sometimes you just have to redo dungeons to get a new key or push your old key up, and that's not a bad thing. It gives you solid practice in the dungeons to familiarize yourself with a dungeon at that level, and helps avoid mistakes if you do get into a higher key for that dungeon later. It's also an opportunity to make new connections or bond as a group. You also have to be prepared for failure. You can't expect to always time a key, especially when it's at the top of your experience range. Breaking into that new level range of keys is hard, and you might even find yourself depleting keys that you've previously timed. It definitely sucks, but it happens, and it's the way that Mythic Plus works, unfortunately. Try to stay positive, look at what your mistakes were, and what you can learn. Maybe even write notes. I know that my group, we have a Discord server with a text channel for every dungeon, where we have VODs, routes, and logs. But what we also do is we write notes after every single dungeon, even if we time it. We look at what went bad, or what will change next time, or even just writing reminders of important things for next time we get that dungeon. When we do get that key and we're getting ready to do it, we quickly have a look through that channel, read the notes, and remind ourselves of what our mistakes were. And this really minimizes the amount of depletes we have and gives us the best chance at timing a new key and getting IO. That's all the tips that I've got for you currently. I really hope you found them useful. This is the first time I've done a video like this. If you did find it useful or you want to see future content, please consider hitting that subscribe button and leaving a like. Let me know what you thought in the comments, if there's any extra notes you'd like to add, or even just like give your own tips to other people that are watching. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you next time.